Hello, everyone. Welcome to our third hashtag social agency hangout. This session's topic is the candidate experience. I'm here with Steve Ward from Cloud9 Media Recruitment. Again, welcome back, Steve, and Bill Boorman as ever. If you would like to participate, you're welcome. There's links on all these channels, including my own on Google+, and there's a live stream on the Colleague Software website. Please feel free to comment, hashtag on Twitter's hashtag social agency. And
ping us if you want to come live. Ping us if you want to come live. Just send us a message if you want to come in live, and we'll send you an invite.
Yeah, that's fine. I think you have to be a friend on Google+, so yeah, just ping over and I'll sort that out.
Make Louis do some work.
Yes, yeah, I need to do something during these hangouts. I think you wrote a blog article, Bill, sort of introducing this topic. You mentioned some pretty negative views of recruitment agencies when it comes to candidate experience that are going around.
Yeah, I mean, what really? I mean, this isn't a new conversation by any means, but there's two things that struck me. One is that I think candidate experience conversation tends to get tied up in the ATS and very much corporate recruiting, and very few people talk about agency recruiting. So I thought we should really have an hour focusing on that topic, which is why it's great to have Steve here. And I think the other point is the actual post came from Graham Salisbury, who blogs on HR case studies. Shout out for Graham and a great blog there. And Graham made the comment after on Twitter, which I picked up on, which is, if the recruitment industry were an employee, I would sack them. Which I thought was it made for a great title of a blog post, but also it gets you thinking. Well, you know, if you were getting measured on performance in terms of candidate experience, what happens there? And I think the other thing that's been really interesting is I've been with the judging the candidate experience awards UK over the last week. So I've spoken to something like 12 companies over interviews about what they're actually doing, and also for KCOM Group, I had quite a long interview with them, and they've really cut down their agency use. And the big point all of the hiring companies were coming back to me with was obviously the benefit that there is cost of hiring, that kind of stuff, no doubt. But the big thing was that they were saying our candidate experience when we've stopped using agencies and started doing it directly, the feedback is that it's considerably better. And I think there's a big issue there in terms of partly from hiring companies' point of view, when they feel they're using an agency, that they're negating the responsibility for any kind of candidate experience to the agency, that it's really the agency responsibility for that. But also from an agency point of view, if candidate experience isn't a concern, and I understand how difficult that is, it's another knock which says, actually, we need to do this ourselves, and our agency is not really giving us any value.
Steve,
yes.
do you want to comment on that?
I totally agree with it. But I think I'm not necessarily the biggest defender of recruitment agencies 100%, and one of the biggest reasons why I'm a bit critical of many recruitment companies is the fact that one area they're particularly poor at is the candidate experience, but not necessarily just the candidate experience is one component of where it goes wrong. It stems from how they start recruiting the people in the first place. And the fact of the matter is, if you set yourself up in such a way to spread and fire jobs all over the place across the internet, your candidate experience is naturally going to be diminished, because you increase the amount of erroneous applications and frivolous applications, and therefore, as a consequence, you ignore more people. And therefore, it's all about badly targeted marketing in the end. My feelings on it obviously stem from my devil's advocate point from a recruiter angle, and one of the reasons why I don't make effort about candidate experience and make it a natural thing, but the reason I don't make it an effort is because there's a recruiter experience side of this argument as well, which is about the time spent by a recruiter the issues that we can face sometimes as recruiters, dealing with the amount of applications that come our way that frankly don't deserve a response.
Yeah, well, I don't know, Steve. I've got to take exception to that on 2 points. One is whenever we have this discussion, we talk about good and bad candidates. And that good candidates deserve attention. They've made the effort. You know, they're good. They meet the bill. And I think the definition from an agency point of view, which has been said in lots of public places, and I think is quite a dangerous thing for an industry to say, was, oh, what's the definition of a good candidate? Somebody we can make money out of. And somebody we can't make money out of, or we can't obviously make money out of, is a bad candidate and is not worthy of attention. And you know, having worked in agencies for a long time, I understand exactly what's being made with that point. I think it's in a public place has been put across in that way. It very much, you know, does damage to the industry as a whole. And I think the other point is, if we look at where things originate, in terms of job marketing and advertising, because of the fear in the agency world that if I'm competing with you against you, Steve, and I put too much information in the ad, you will know who the client is, you will ring them up, you will get the job, I'll lose a fee. Therefore, the nature is hide as much information, don't give away, you know, make it as vague as our advertising and marketing as vague as we can, don't quite state the location.
And I think that stems from this, and this is where this problem comes from, because it stems around a massive mistrust. You know, when I wrote a blog about this about a year or so ago, just kind of leveling the field with a kind of, you know, there's a bit of hype around candidate experience about a year to 18 months ago. There was a hashtag that was created around it, and it was a very hot theme all of a sudden, and quite rightly so. But you know, there was a blog that Jack Barton wrote, and I wrote a very similar one as well around the case of sometimes we have to defend our kind of partners as well, and because I think there is a mistrust issue. Recruiters got to a point where they're basically trying to deal with too many candidates at a given time. It's that horrible thing that recruiters used to do and still do, but I used to do it as a recruiter, where you put post out there to say, come and walk in, come and see us, open your arms up to every application. And where recruiters got caught up in that and got their knickers in a twist with all that was they ended up having too many people. They open your arms too wide and too many people come in. Then you realise that actually 80% of the people aren't relevant to your client market. You can only deal with a certain amount of them at any given time, and therefore there's always going to be...
There's really simple ways of dealing with that, Steve. I mean, one thing I've always done with the... I've effectively looked at people that we're connected with it as an agency in 3 categories. One is those people who we feel we can make money from, because we've got jobs that we can match them now. Therefore, we want to get close to them as quickly as possible. The second group of people is those people who are interesting to us, but not necessarily immediately interesting. But I want to maintain some dialogue because you're in the right kind of market. I just don't have a job to talk to you about today, but I can see from your record. And the third group of people, which is probably the biggest set, are those people I'm probably never going to be able to help. Now, there's a very simple way of dealing with that. We used to deal with it on email by having a pack made up of useful resources, advice, other websites, other agencies. It was very simple once it was created on email. It took about 2 hours to put it together. And if we weren't able to help you, you automatically, a candidate got reviewed very quickly, and they got that out to say, look, we probably can't help you. Here's some stuff that will be able to help you. And people thought that was revolutionary. I mean, this is like an email pack.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, look, it is absolutely simple as that. And I think if there was and I think where the challenge lies for a lot of agencies is that increasingly we're smaller agencies with less resources, and I think every recruitment company goes with the right intention of thinking, yeah, we'll send an email out to every applicant. I always would say that I would always try to send an email out to every response I can. But the reality is I don't, because I can't.
But you could automate that, and you could automate that in a very simple way.
Yeah, you could automate. I mean, there are ways of automate. I suppose when I try to sort of rationalise this kind of as a subject area, you know, I look at it. You know, and I think there is this big I
But
think
if you've got too many applicants, stop advertising.
well, exactly.
Yes.
And I
It's
think
not,
this is
it's
where
not
so
that
Could you
complicated.
focus on getting higher quality applicants? On you know, perhaps it's part of this
No,
spray,
no,
spray and pray problem.
Louis, I think this is part of the problem in terms of how recruitment has changed. You know, I'm fairly grey-haired. I remember the old days. In the old days, before we had the internet and everything else, we used to get jobs for candidates, not candidates for jobs.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so our emphasis in terms of it wasn't transactional. You know, as a recruiter, I was never allowed more than 4 candidates. And my job then was to get jobs and interviews for those candidates, and then I could have some more.
Yeah.
And that's the way we worked. So it was much less transactional. It was much more. And I always get into the questions. I think who's the client? We have we're very much led by the check signer who signs the check, whereas actually the candidate, I believe in the current market, the candidate with the right skills actually holds the power. So the relationship with the right candidate. Forget about anything moral or flowery or tree hugging.
And
from a commercial point of view.
It's about the network that they keep, about the company they keep, and in this day and age, even more so, the reputation of a recruiter because of the company they keep is more important than ever. And I would, from an active recruitment point of view, I'm probably as highly connected as anybody from a point of view of using social media and blah blah. If I make a candidate error, if I make a mistake, I'm at most danger of anybody, I think, in the UK, frankly, to because of the amount of followers I have on Recruit. You know, I'm the one that gets applications every day and has to deal with those sort of things. But I think the way recruitment has moved on, I would like to think, or how it certainly should be moving on, is that we should hopefully be getting away from the spray and pray job boards, random advertising in the hope that we get 2 or 3 candidates out of 100 that are going to be correct. More into the whole realm of being community centerpieces and being industry centerpieces, whereby actually it doesn't matter that it's taken me a couple of days longer to get back to a candidate than they would have probably expected, because they can see my visibility and I'm visible to them. They can see what I'm doing in the marketplace day after day, and they can pull me up on it if they want to. They can hop on Twitter if they like and say, "Oi, I emailed you yesterday.
I've not heard back from you."
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got no problems with that if they do that. And now and again that will happen. I'll get an email saying, "By the way, I emailed you yesterday." And nobody really takes offence at that kind of stuff. But also people can recognise other things from your social visibility. And I think if I'm somebody who produces events and does things around just doing recruitment, and the transactional thing that we talk about is not evident in the kind of recruitment that I do. It's not about just transactions. It's about community and visibility in an environment, and that's how I create my candidate flow. And that means that it's not as broad a candidate flow as if I'm sitting in a deco office.
Yeah. Well, I see, Steve.
And I think this is where sometimes there's a different kind of candidate experience you can create by not being all about transaction, job application.
Right. I mean, the transaction point, I think, is an important one I want to pick up on, because in the feedback for the research that I've done recently for the colleague white paper, which is out when, Louis? And Louis will be able to tell us when it's available.
It should
for
be
download.
out in the next couple of weeks. So.
Yeah. The research that we've had back, one of probably the major complaints is that I was sourced on LinkedIn. The recruiter came to me. They were all over me. I needed to bring them back within 30 seconds, and they were full of, an opportunity for me, and I was really excited about it. And I put my details on, and we started talking, and they were going to send my information off to the client, and then black hole, nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm ringing back saying, "Oh, where are we up to? I was really excited about that job, and I'm hearing nothing." And I think that's really what people are talking about in the transactional basis, is that recruiters are looking on individuals for a job. And if they're not successful in that, which the majority of them aren't, if they're not seeing my clients, or the client changes the spec, or the client doesn't give any feedback. I mean, number 3 on that list in terms of what the top 3 things which candidates wanted from their recruiters. Number 1 was niche market knowledge. They wanted you to understand the sector that you were recruiting in to some degree. And I think that's really important. Number two was overall market knowledge in terms of jobs and market rates and what's happening. So on one hand, they wanted you to have the technical skills and understanding if you were hiring C++ programmers that you could talk C++ with them. That you had the overall market knowledge to be able to advise about the market as a whole rather than an individual job. And the third thing was feedback. That I get feedback and I get it in a timely way, and you agree, and I know what's going to happen next. And these were overwhelming, and it was a big thing, very, very close top three. That the feedback I was getting in the research was, look, I'm dealing with recruiters who don't understand my market. They're recruiting from a job spec which they don't understand because they're not able to answer any questions, and they're all over me, and I never hear from them again. I disappear. And I think one of the lessons we've got to take out the corporate world, which is where the competition is coming from, is increasingly we're seeing corporate recruiters building talent networks, which is saying let's stay. People are connecting in terms of jobs for longer. Logical way they would do that with a hiring organisation. With an agency, we want people thinking, keep in touch with me just so you can see what's going on.
Yeah. I think it's. I agree. I agree with all of that, and I think that's why the original statements about the move towards in-house, the want to drop agencies because there is a poor candidate experience, but there's a poor client experience in that respect as well.
Agree.
Because it's appalling the way some recruiters represent their clients. There's no excitement. There's no representation of the client. There's no understanding of the client.
Yeah, and I can hear people wringing their hands. So I do have to say it's equally appalling the way some clients treat their recruiters.
Course, it goes two ways.
They create the situation.
But they do. But recruiters can manage this situation. Recruitment agencies can manage this situation. We've paid several £1,000s in fees every time for doing this job. I think the minimum we could do is ask 5 or 6 more questions just to guarantee we've got the right kind of data and information on a position. So it's quite basic stuff that has been taken out of the equation now in place of fast food recruitment, trying to turn things around as quickly as possible for the minimum cost, at the quickest speed.
And for the maximum margin possible.
And the maximum margin and the minimum amount of communication that's necessary. That's where the problem is lie. We live in an environment now where recruitment is not about the relationships and those one-to-one transactions any longer. It's much more about the masses that's where the problem lies. And of course, each component of that process is naturally going to be more affected, and that includes the recruiter. So it's a problem of the recruitment agency as a whole, and I think it's a learning experience. I just put a conversation on the IOR sites as I was doing kind of some of my notes for this to kind of, when it came back to it, the stem came back to it. It stems all the way back from how we go about recruiting people in the first place. And like you say, it's the LinkedIn things that people just charge, send 30 emails out on LinkedIn to a bunch of people, and then
source and spray.
25 of them. Say again?
Yeah, source and spray.
Source and spray.
Job title not matching. Post and pray just became source and spray. It was right. Okay, instead of putting an ad up and waiting for 100 people to apply, I'll email 100 people because they were all called customer service manager and they all live in roughly Brighton area.
But the reality is they do both now, Bill. That's the problem. You've got your source and sprays and you've got posting and sprays because still, we still know that Reed and Total Jobs and JobSite and all this kind of stuff are still posting jobs at a terrific rate from recruitment agencies. They're now doubling the workload for themselves.
Well, yeah, I think I wrote a post the other day on Recruiting Unblog about, I know you commented on, Steve, that and what prompted it was I got 5 emails in a row from different suppliers that were all saying, let us increase your response. We'll automatically push you out to these 5 or 10 free job boards and job aggregators and all the places we're going to go. We'll get you more people. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't want any more people. I can't manage any. We've already got 1 million people in the database. We don't want any more people.
Yeah.
So is this technology that's caused this problem then?
No, it's
in a
never.
way.
It's never a
And
technology problem. It's never a technology problem. It's always the way in which technology is used.
So
Right.
technology could help solve this problem down the line.
Well, I mean,
Perhaps.
technology
Well,
can do
social
anything.
media.
Well, no, I mean, technology can do anything you want, Louis. Really, you know, if there's a demand for it, someone will build it. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah.
However, what technology has done is it's created layers of relationship, and equally, I think equally, one of the skills that I think is distinctly lacking, and I hear it all the time. I'm an old school recruiter and an old school trader, so you would have heard me saying over the years, phone, 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 phone. And I think what the trick that people are missing, while phone time and conversation is important, the actual art and learning to have a conversation online through an instant chat or a Google Hangout, or even email now has become instant messaging because you go into people's phones. So even now you're exchanging 20 or 30 short emails. If you look at the way people communicate now on things like platform games, people are used to communicating online. That's where they're comfortable, and I think that's again equally something you can learn. What can we do? How can we update people? How can we do things like once a week we can do blog talk radios or whatever we're doing to update people on the jobs we've got, or just tell people. How can we run a talent network? What does a talent network do? If you run a corporate site, and we'll work equally for an agency, we'll send you jobs that match you on a regular basis. We'll send you content that we find that will match, and then we'll do what you do, but we'll remain continually connected with you. We won't stick you in the we won't stick you in the bottom drawer and forget about you, which is really what happens in the database. You know, most agencies I go to don't really search their database, or know how to actually. They don't search the database. Now, for me, search your database first before you do anything else. It's kind of like running a shop. It's like running a shop and every day going out to buy new stock before you've actually sold any of the old stuff. And you keep going out, and the conversations I've had many times with recruiters where they've said, "Oh, we just haven't got the right candidates, so we need to spend more money, or we need to do more sourcing, or whatever." Say, well, do you not have the right candidates, or do you not have the right jobs?
Yeah.
Agreed. Totally agreed. It's a basic recruitment principle from years and years ago, isn't it? Is you concentrate on what you've got before you go anywhere else, and it goes back to those days when you were saying you had 4 candidates. I was allowed 15, but I was quite privileged. I was when I had 15 candidates, but I wasn't allowed any more than 15, and I had to yield them after 2 weeks, and everything revolved around those 15 candidates. Yeah, there's too many. Where technology comes in, Louis, is that technology gives us more things to play with, and the more things we play with, the more that we play badly with. And that's the problem, is that we try too many things. There are too many processes that we think can make life easier. But actually, sometimes, you know, this is where I've always got that balance of I like the new technology, I like new methodology, but the basic principles of good communication still revolve around what you do out of your mouth, rather than what you do on keypads sometimes, and what you do on your mobile phone and all that kind of stuff. You still have to take points of technology to a level where you communicate effectively. So we tend to, I get massively concerned by trying to automate too many things, because the more we automate, the more we spread, the wider we spread,
and the more distant
without
you
detail
become.
And without personalization. And the more we do that, the worse the candidate experience is going to become, because more are going to be neglected. So
they will know. They will know if it's not a personal email, even if it is automated.
Yeah, of course they do. We've all had them from companies
or whatever.
I actually don't think people mind that, Louis. You know, I don't think people mind automated emails as long as it's not.
It depends, doesn't it?
No, I think
as
long as it's not a Dear John and it's an update and it's offering something or giving something. You know, an automated email will be 100 times better than what's happening in 99% of the cases of what's going on. What the situation is, and you'll have a whole chunk of colleague customers who will be exactly the same to people using other recruitment databases, is recruitment databases are used for information storage, not information retrieval. That doesn't mean you can't get information out of there. you know, I look at things and say, what are people not using on their database? Most people don't use any level of tagging. So if you don't use any level of tagging, you can't do any retrieval. That's for clients, that's for jobs, that's for candidates, whatever it is. So what we do is what we used to do. When everything used to come in on paper, we used to get it in the post. I used to have a filing cabinet in which I could put CVs, right? And I used to keep the CVs in that filing cabinet for 7 years. And the reason I kept them in that filing cabinet was for 7 years was because the law said I had to keep them for 7 years, not because they were ever going to be useful. And what I did is when that filing cabinet was full, I went out and bought another filing cabinet, and I went out and bought another filing cabinet. And I can remember one office in particular, when we had 10 filing cabinets, we had to get the floor reinforced because it was going to fall through. So all we were doing was shoving candidates in these filing cabinets, and nobody was ever actually opening the filing cabinet and saying, I wonder what we've got in here. And we weren't ever organising it so we could do that because we stored them all by date order, not by skill or discipline or anything else. And I think that's what people have done with their databases. They've just said, right, okay, we'll get all these CVs, we'll get them all uploaded, we'll put them all in. Every candidate will put online, every client will put online, every job will put online. But we're not going to start thinking about when are we going to want to retrieve something? When we get a job, I want to go and see the people I've got at the moment. I want to go and see the people most recently. But I also want to make my technology work intelligently. So if I got a CV from someone who was a call handler who had 3 months or 6 months call handling experience 3 years ago, I've got to be able to make an assumption that they have 3 years call handling experience. So if I'm doing a search, they're coming up in my possibles. They're not, but at the moment, the way people are storing information is still reading them as having 6 months experience. Therefore, what I'm not doing is creating reasons to go back to the same people to say, right, where are you up to? What's changed? What's going on? How have you progressed? So my application and all the information I hold and I hold on you is based on the day that you applied to me. The next day is our day. So that's not a technology issue because, you know, there's very few recruitment databases that can't do all that. They're just not used in that way. They're used for storage. They're used for legal reasons. They're not used for recruiters to work intelligently on relationship. And to be honest,
retrieval, but also engagement.
Yeah, well, engagement is part of that retrieval process. You know that I'm talking to you, I'm doing certain stuff. We used to have before we had a lot of candidates, and Steve will remember this. We used to email people every month what was called a kit letter, which was keep in touch, and it was just really to say anything changed, what you up to, have you got a job, what's going on, because the volumes were quite small and we could manage that. We can manage that. Now the volumes are huge because we're storing everything and everyone can apply from us and we're not organising that data. We can't keep in touch anymore. Actually, we could do if we could tag profiles and things like that. But so I think we just don't think like that. All we do is we think this is the general methodology in a recruitment agency. I get a job, I put it on my database, it goes to a multi-job poster, it gets posted to every job board, I check my emails to see who comes in, and unless I get a mental note to say, oh, I remember that candidate the other day who was on the money, I never really go back into my database and say, hang on a minute, who else has talked to us, who else have we get in touch with, who else could we send a message to or pick the phone up and say, right, okay, what's changed over the last 9 months from when we first talked to you? Because this is what's going on. Because that's what building a network is about, really. Is saying, right, let's just keep in touch with who's doing what. And I don't see those skills anymore. I'd see it totally about speed, CV database, transactional CV database, i.e. you don't even search the CV databases on Monster and stuff anymore. You just set alerts as soon as one gets put on. You know, where is the relationship in that? And if the relationship isn't there, where is the experience?
And I think the key, the real key skill of a recruiter is almost, in a sense, subliminally educating the candidate to do the legwork, in a sense. Because what we've just talked about there is, I think, what recruitment agencies have done for a long time and continue to do now is to do a lot of the chasing. And we do a lot of the chasing around to find the people that we need to find. But there's almost, the element where the candidate comes and checks with us because of the nature of the relationship piece is so good, and almost like the the dependency on their part upon you. That there's a kind of like an education piece in recruitment, and that's not something you write down on an email and say, right, you must do X, Y, Z, blah blah. But you create a I suppose an environment, a transactional environment, and a relationship that means that they're looking out for my tweets, they're looking out for my LinkedIn posts. I can put a little message on Twitter in the morning, and a dozen candidates will come back as a response for it. And it's about and the way we can reduce this candidate experience problem without necessarily worrying about is to try and get away from the mass crowd thing a little bit. Stop plonking jobs on read.co.uk and bemoaning the fact that 95 out of 100 applications are terrible. But it's to deal with the communities of people that are making every communication that comes to us pretty much relevant. And I would say
focus.
But Steve, if you worked in any other online business, I think Steve's just gone, but I'll make the point. He'll log back in a minute. He's gone into the dark. Either that or he's just gone into the dark, or he's turned his light on and disappeared. Louis, the point I was going to make on that is, if we were in any other business, this is what happens. If you advertised and suddenly, once you advertised, all of the people who were replying to your ads were terrible customers, were not people who were going to buy off you, were not people who fitted your profile of budget or age group or anything else. As a marketeer, you change your advertising.
Yes.
Or you change your attraction. If you were in any other business, you would do that. If you said, "Look, the people,"
you'd focus. You focus your efforts. So.
You wouldn't just sit there going, "Oh, all of our advertising isn't working. We're not getting any customers. It's not. They're all bad people because they're coming in to see us." You'd go, "Okay, we've got to do one or two things. We've either got to change our product line because I'm a butcher and everyone's turned vegetarian, so maybe I need to start selling a few potatoes," or you're going to go. Or actually, no, we need to go and advertise somewhere else, or word it in a different way. But pretty quickly, you would react to the fact that you weren't attracting people who could buy off you, people who wanted what you had to offer. But in recruitment, we don't do that. What we do is we say, we get a load of bad candidates. What should we do? Let's do exactly the same thing again. Let's put the bad ads in more places. Let's get some more free job boards.
And stop getting bad candidates. I mean, it's a really funny little thing, but I work in a niche area, and I'd like to think more recruiters are thinking about how they work in niche areas more. And it doesn't matter whether it's social media or whatever it is, but if it's creating a situation where you don't get bad candidates. You get very, very few bad candidates. And because you're working so much in a cluster, you're making sure you connect and communicate and have transactional relationships with the right people, rather than creating opportunities to have lots of bad conversations with the wrong people, or no conversations at all with the wrong people. To me, it's a whole different mindset about how we go about talent attraction.
Are they bad candidates, Steve? Are they bad
No. When I say bad candidate, I mean, I apologise using bad candidates. Not really what I meant. Irrelevant candidates, and candidates that we're likely to let down as recruitment agencies as a whole. The kind of people that partly because.
But just tell them, Steve. Do the old dating analogy. It's not you, it's me. We're just not. We're not suited. We don't have anything in common, unfortunately. Therefore,
well, it is a bit like that.
It might be a good idea for you to go out and find another fella,
Yeah, that's right. Well, it is a little bit like that, because that's kind of what you're saying in a way. Is look, I know my area as a recruiter. I know what I'm good at. I know what I can recruit. You're not it. In the nicest possible way, it's you're talking to the wrong guy. Although I'm not gonna find you your next job. That's how it's. And the earlier they know that in a conversation, then the better. Or the alternative is you would try to avoid conversation, being the scenario where you put yourself in conversation. And that's why I
think you just have to say to people.
Anymore.
I've always put across to people and said to people, believe me, if there's any way I can find you a job, I would, because that's how I make my money.
Yeah,
so I'm not gonna deliberately not find you a job.
At least you're still being honest. You're still communicating.
Oh,
you're not ignoring. Yeah. You're not ignoring an
you're not ignoring
inquiry. So.
And I think that's the point you're actually saying to them. It's not a case of if I can possibly find you a job. The point is, I think I'm probably not going to find you a job. Therefore, I'm wasting your time.
As you said earlier, Bill, you can then help. you can then direct them somewhere
Yeah.
where they can be helped.
And I could do that in an email, by the way. I could communicate that message in an email quite easily to say, look, I'm probably, you know, I'll help everyone get a job I humanly can, because that's how I eat.
Yeah.
But I'm probably not going to be able to help you because you know, you're not in the sector that we work in with the relationships we've got, and we'll always keep your details here. But in honesty, go and try something different. You know, go and have a look at something. Go try somebody else, because they're probably more likely to help you.
And I think this is where the positioning of the recruiter and the perception of who we are as recruiters is massively important, because we've got a bad reputation. Recruiters have got a bad reputation, so naturally in the world of blame culture, we're going to get it in the neck. If we don't do it right, we're going to get it in the neck, because it's a repetition thing. It's a common ground to argue about recruiters. Nobody's putting any scary, any kind of out of tune things by saying recruiters are wrong, because lots of people will back them up on Facebook and say, I know. And
it's mostly recruiters who back them up, by the way. It's mostly
me included.
The most negative conversations about recruiters come
from often by recruiters.
And the attitude. And I've never once heard one recruiter say, I give a bad candidate experience, I don't really have a relationship with my clients. They all say, I do this and we're brilliant at this. Everybody else, it's that cloud nine. They're no good at this. These ones down the road, they're rubbish. And these, these public conversations by recruiters is really damaging for the industry, I think. It is, and this whole, it's everybody else is terrible, and nobody collectively seems to, and our trade organisations, because we've got so many of them, we've got about 10 of them all squabbling among themselves about somebody else. Nobody is getting hold of it and saying, you know what, let's just sort out brand recruiter. Let's just look at the things. Let's not apportion it. Let's figure out the things we do well, the things we don't do well, and let's try and let's just talk positively about how we can make certain things better. And actually, candidate experience is really important.
And I think recruiters is quite insular. And this is where trade bodies and the likes can only help recruitment agencies to an extent in the modern day and age.
Yeah, but they have as much competition as the agencies do.
No, they do, yeah. So
go on the RNC
or choose anyway,
or is it the IOR, or let's have another one, let's go and talk to somebody else. And at the end of the day, get a hold. Just get a hold of it and say, right, okay.
As a recruiters, we've got to get a hold of it ourselves. That's the thing. We can't blame bodies and organisations. We can't blame Reed. We've got to be.
Reed will provide a site as long as you use it, Steve. That's the bottom line.
I'm sorry, I meant Reed actually as an agency or as a like Kelly's or anything like that.
You can't blame the CRM either.
No, you can only blame. You can only be responsible for your own perception and your own reputation, and therefore, if people are going to say negative stuff about you, it's because you've done bad stuff, basically, and that's the perception issue that I go on a lot about, and we've got to position ourselves as recruiters in a different way that people perceive us differently, and that's why we've kind of got to go back to the old-fashioned thing, the old kind of 1980s thing of this what the value of a recruitment agency is, and you're a kind of a centerpiece of the community. I always remember Kelly's were brilliant at that back in the 80s, the whole Kelly's Girl thing and all that kind of stuff, and as soon as somebody needed a job, what do? They go and register.
This is where you went. But you see, when recruiting was local, which it used to be, geography meant it was local.
Yeah.
You had to go into the office, and if you were looking for a job, you'd probably go to the one in Brighton because you live in Brighton, right?
Of course you would.
You wouldn't be dealing with an agency in Preston.
No.
About a job that you've got, in the same way as and that brings with it lots of benefits in that you can operate from Brighton and you can deal with pretty much anywhere in the world. That's not a problem. But I think you've got to bring back those local conversation and understanding principles, even if what you're doing is online, even if you're doing it through Skype, Google Plus, whatever you're doing. You've got to get back to those conversations and understanding and proper interviewing of candidates so that you have a relationship with them. and relationship with clients. You've got to have a relationship with your clients, which isn't transactional.
Yeah, and it's actually easier now because of things like this. It's easier now than it has ever been to have face-to-face conversations, and I kind of get disgruntled by hearing the amount of recruiters who just don't do any face-to-face recruiting anymore, who don't meet people.
Actively discourage it. I see it. They actually discourage people from coming in their office because that would disrupt their day.
Yeah, no, please don't. Yeah. I mean, it's about
they view meeting candidates as a waste of time. Is that what you're saying? Some do.
Well, partly. No, it's just not the way. It's just not the way things are done anymore. And the reason is, it was a geography issue because when recruitment was always a local business, right? So if you wanted a job so let's just say when I was director of Primetime, and when we opened Primetime, we did sales recruitment. Well, we did sales recruitment and industrial recruitment, but we opened with the perm business spring revenue, and we opened sales recruitment, and we opened with 6 offices, and we opened 6 offices because we figured out no clients or no candidates would deal with us in more than a 100-mile radius. Right. Anyway, so we opened 6 offices along the motorways so that sales reps could come and see us. They could come and talk to us. They could come, area sales managers could come and see us. They could come, that they could come and do stuff. So that was really built on a local business, and 100 miles was as far as you could go. And when we started doing commercial and high street stuff and industrial stuff, it was really pretty much a 10-mile radius. If someone was if a customer was in Horsham or a candidate was in Horsham, they wouldn't deal with you in Brighton because you were too far away. You were in a different country. Yeah. Now, what technology's done is it's actually spread all that. And I think that's a good thing. I think that offers great potential to get more and more niche across a wider area. But it doesn't mean you need to negate the fact that you're not meeting face to face with people. Doesn't negate that you can't build a relationship with people. And this word relationship over transactional keeps coming up, that you need to have a relationship. I think it's very important for candidate experience. I think it's very important that you have a relationship with your client so they're giving you feedback at the right times. I think it's quite important for recruiters to sack clients sometimes who don't. You need to actually be demanding about it and say, look, you can't treat my candidates in this way. I can't leave them in the dark. It can't happen. So if you can't give me feedback, I need to go and find another customer who can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as you said, there is the social media, webcam technology. You can have face-to-face meetings. You can build that relationship as if you had met. But actually, Steve, I think the term I take objection to is when people say in real life.
Yeah.
I haven't met them IRL. I haven't met them in real life. And say, well, actually, if I think about it now, I have relationships with people who I've never physically met.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where my relationship is every bit as strong, and in some cases stronger than people I've actually physically sat in the same room as.
Yeah.
And I think we need to adopt that. That it is real life. They are real conversations. They might be at 140 characters. They are getting to know and engaging with people over time.
And I think with because of all these things like social media, how easy it is to connect with people now. We make a lot of relationships before we've even had what you would consider a recruitment transaction. And again, I think should be the skill of a modern recruiter. It's something I always say, and I know you say it as well, Bill, about having conversations with people that actually absolutely mean nothing at that given time. There's no agenda to those conversations.
Return on irrelevance.
Yeah, absolutely. Return on irrelevance. Very good. It is. It's meeting people in places and not talking about recruitment. I talk about recruitment very, very rarely with people within my industry, and if they need me to talk about recruitment, I'll talk about recruitment because I'm accessible and visible and they know who I am.
And everyone knows what you do.
Exactly.
You make sure everybody knows what you do.
But I make it my business to make sure that everybody knows what I do through relationship building, blah, blah. And that's what the point I'm making about where you go back to this kind of community kind of mentality of I'm the bloke that people go to when they need a social media person. They're prepared to use a recruitment agency. So that kind of relationship, that's my ultimate goal. That's the goal of my that's purpose of my business, is to be the guy that everyone goes to as a natural first choice. Not because I sold to them, and not because I drilled it down their necks, and just because
you're the guy they know. You're the guy they know. You know, people want to buy people they know.
That can happen in mining. That can happen in tax accountancy. That can happen in C++ development in certain groups or whatever. That can happen because you create a certain amount of visibility. Now, and then what it does when you create relationship before the recruitment transaction, it gives you the leeway to negate the negative candidate experience scenario, because where you have,
I think you actually care about it though, Steve. You know, if you've got a relationship with someone and you've spoken to them over a period of time, not just a short period of time when there's a job on, you actually have some care in the process. Because you're going to speak to that person again, you're going to see, you know, and that's the same as any relationship. If you know you're going to see someone again, you're going to manage how you're going to deal with either delivering bad news or giving them feedback or whatever you're going to do. You're not just going to suddenly go, right, okay, nice to meet you, I'm going to disappear now.
But the relationship, the strength of the relationship is different. So therefore, their appreciation of you, their understanding that it might take you a little bit longer to get back to them, their understanding.
It works both ways.
They recognise that. So if you've built relationships with people, you get leeway. You don't get the horrible kind of, oh Christ, Cloud9 wreck there's been an idiot. I've replied to him 3 days ago. He hasn't got back to me again.
Yeah.
You don't get that because people kind of go, I know you're busy.
But I'm fairly sure Steve, I'm fairly sure what would happen, you know, if somebody posted on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere, Steve Ward of Cloud9 Recruitment hasn't come back to me, he's a waste of space, 10 people would come back and say, actually, I've had a different... I had a different experience. Let me defend. You know, let me say I don't know what it was. I don't know what happened there.
And it does. Somebody will say, because often I mean, the big challenge about candidate experience is every recruiter says they don't have a bad candidate experience because they never hear the complaints. Because usually people complain to somebody else. Very rarely do people complain directly because it's too challenging. It's too dangerous for them. It's out of their comfort zone. They'll complain to their mates. So if somebody somebody will often say I won't say often because that's probably not quite right, but now and again somebody will say, oh, I didn't hear from Steve, blah, 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 on this guy. And that person will then copy me into a Twitter, say, that's not right. Steve would not get back to you. And sure enough, it was just a little error somewhere along the way that something didn't connect. But that's what building community and building a kind of visibility and a connection environment that kind of takes away that kind of perception of kind of like we're a horrible guy, we gits who just try and take people for their money, is the big key, because then the starting point we have with people is in quite a good space. We don't start on negative footing. With most forms of job advertising and candidate approaches, we kind of start on a kind of a negative footing. We're already 10 yards behind the ball, because we've got to try and catch up and win them over, and that. Yeah,
well, see, I don't think it's difficult for an agency to provide and stand out with candidate experience because the expectation is you're not going to give one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
yeah.
So straight away, you don't have to do big stuff. The networks and net worth and everything. You don't have to do big stuff just to acknowledge the people and speak to people. And I think with all the numbers and everything else that we do in recruitment, sometimes you have to remember that there's people at the end of it. That data.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
When I was recruited to colleague, I won't mention by who, but he's a very traditional recruiter and a very local Norwich-based recruiter. And there was no social media involved. It was through a job board. And I started with it as a candidate with the negative view of recruiters. Despite never having met a recruit in my life. And
so why did you think that, Louis? Tell us why you thought that, because that's a good example for anyone listening.
Just talking to other people, graduates, and I guess it's just rumours, but I didn't have any evidence for my view. I guess that's what brand is, isn't it? So that's that bad recruiter brand you were talking about. The recruiter in question, despite the lack in a very traditional local recruiter, he just was authentic. He was had a way he cared about you and the job and the client, which was colleague, So I know both ends of it, and we still work with him. And he followed up after the interview straight away, gave the feedback, was friendly, gave good advice, and acted like a normal person, and sent me a chocolate cake.
So that's a bit worrying when you're saying acted like a normal person. It kind of says something about
a nice person.
I'm really surprised that the recruiter was a normal person. I expected him to be something different, and that's brilliant.
Still, I think it's relevant.
Do we know anything about the experience of the other 9 candidates who didn't get the job who applied on job site?
The issue lies, That's where the challenge is, isn't it? Because we reject more than we recruit.
Yeah, I mean, I got the job, so I'm probably biased. But
yeah, I'm not deriding your local man, because very often those local recruiters do provide that.
Yeah.
Well, I gave him referrals, and so he that's what you get out of it, don't you? If you treat people well, people remember you, and I've recommended people to him. So, inbound inquiries, like as you get online, Steve, from this effort of building a talent network. So it's,
and that's the ultimate aim, and that's why we have to take care over the way we communicate with people. And I saw somebody write a blog today that I haven't read today, but her blog, she just runs a little agency in Swindon, but her blog was saying how recruitment is a communications business, not a sales business, and I quite liked that, because it's much more about communications. Gives us it's broader than sales. It's much more about perception of response. It's about understanding your market zone and the tone of voice that you use, and how you analyze your market and understand. Communications and marketing is a much more effective word to have.
And influence.
Yeah, massively influence.
I influenced, whereas it was standard term to say candidate control. Which suggests I get my candidates, I box them up, I order them, I tell them what to do, and God forbid if they disagree with me.
It's respect. Influence comes from respect. That's the key of it.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the big thing. I think there are some real important points around the advertising and the attraction, the volumes that need to be thought about. I think there is around work with the candidates you've got rather than the ones you haven't. Rather than forever wishing that you get a different kind of candidate. I think there's important points in that, but I think the things you can do in terms of candidate experience, including allocating time to it, allocating time to network with candidates and spend time understanding them a bit better. I don't think it's big stuff people have to do. I just think it has to be important, and I don't think it's important to people anymore.
But the candidate side, you don't think it's important to anybody anymore?
I don't think it's important to the clients anymore. I don't think it's important to the clients anymore, and I think the candidates expect the recruiters to be rubbish anyway. Therefore,
they do.
They're none too disappointed, and they will say, "I'll deal with it. I'll deal with the agency because that's the only way I can get the job." But if I had any opportunity or any chance to apply directly, I would do. And increasingly, they're getting more and more ways that they can apply directly.
I think one of the things we have to be conscious of is that we can't avoid bad situations. It's unavoidable, because we can't control the mind of a regularly unsuccessful job seeker. And let's be fair, there's always going to be those guys, and there is quite a lot of them, sadly, who are again and again and again apply and are regularly unsuccessful. And often they're the people who shout the loudest and the most in more public places. It's just how it happens. Sometimes we can't control those extreme examples. We just have to make the best of what we can do in all the circumstances that we can. But I think the thing that overrides this is by creating more great examples. The more great examples we provide as recruiters, and the more great stories we provide as recruiters, should outweigh the occasional negative comment that comes any business's way that you can't control. And I think this is where I kind of sometimes get a little bit kind of uppity about aspects of the candidate experience conversation, because what we tend to focus on is ensuring that there is a response and there's a feedback cycle and an administrative process is completed. but but sort of forgetting that actually that our job, our real job, is to create the wow experiences. And those are little wow experiences. It's not just about getting somebody a job every time, but it's about, you know, you can tell how bad the marketplace is because every time I respond to somebody who sent me an email, and let's say I do it within half an hour, I get the wow. Thanks for the really fantastic.
You've actually replied. You've actually
you've actually replied, and two, how quick is reply? And when I didn't reply to somebody, and I came back to them the next day and said, I apologise, I completely missed your email yesterday. They said, well, one, I don't normally get a response, and two, I definitely don't get an apology. So even wow experiences are often quite small transactional points that just make a difference. And sometimes, so that I think there's always there are certain negative experiences we can't avoid or inevitably going to happen because we're a business, we're all running businesses, and we cannot get everything right all the time, particularly when you're dealing with numbers. But I think the challenge to me is making wow experiences, because that's what creates referral and recommendation businesses, by people saying, this guy does good stuff. He might not have got me the job, but he got me.
He is bothered about me.
He's bothered. He cares. Yeah, he knows. And he knows
he is. I'm not just a piece of meat. I'm not just getting shunted about.
Yeah,
you know, I'm not a number, and I'm not a number on his matrix. So we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left, Steve. So if you were summing up and saying, you know, any agency recruiters listening in, what are the basic things they can do in their job? And they might be working for someone that doesn't allow them to do any big stuff. What are the basic things they can do to make a difference?
Build relationships. It's got to start around how you use target the best 100. The kind of metrics we're talking about these days. Target the best 100, not the best 1,000, and know that 100 intimately, and build relationships with those people from an active recruitment point of view. That's my agenda. Go for the 100 rather than the 1,000.
Yeah. And Louis?
Communicate, keep in touch, treat people with respect.
Yeah,
and you should be treated with respect.
So. I mean, I think the point Steve's making, you know, you've got to work on smaller numbers. You've got to work on finding jobs for people rather than people for jobs, because I think you can manage those relationships with candidates. I think you need to be recognising that actually the thing that stops you growing your business in general, whether you're running a desk or an agency, is the right type of candidates coming through the door. That's what's stopping you. It's not your lack of sales or your lack of clients or clients messing about. So, you know, look at what you've got, start working around jobs for that, start looking at how you're using your database to get back in touch with people and re-engaging people and working on information retrieval rather than information storage, and actually recognise that this is one of the most important things towards the growth and survival of the agency business. And if we don't get the candidate experience right, all we're going to be left with is desperate and unemployable.
Yeah. Good roundup. Okay, well, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Steve. I think we'll be having another hangout sort of
2 weeks.
Yeah, in a few weeks' time on that white paper, I think. Which, we'll be covering some of these topics from transaction to relationship recruiting, the agency opportunity. That's the title, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah. I'm also going to be at in Atlanta in SourceCon as of tomorrow, which is a sourcing conference for finding hard talent. So at some point, I'll be sharing I will be sharing some tips on the colleague blog as well. So keep an eye out for that.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and as always, feel free to leave some feedback, and we'll bring it up next time.
That's great. Thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Steve. Bye.